Things happen, right? It's practice. Hello, everyone, and welcome to breakout session with Bakita, who will tell about her experience of applying and holding pre-doctoral NIHR fellowship. So Bakita is an NIHR doctoral research fellow at the University of Oxford. And she'll tell you a lot about her work and her experience and some of the challenges we all can learn from. And just to introduce slide as well, so the same as previous sessions, all your questions could go there, kind of vote those, and we'll have some time for questions, hopefully a few minutes, a few questions at the end for Bakita as well. And without any further ado, welcome, Bakita.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining the session in person and online. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to talk to all of you. So as Asta said, my name is Bakita Kasadha. I'm based at the Primary Care Department of Health Sciences. Don't know why I had to think about that, must be the nerves. And I'm going to be talking to you about my experience of applying for the pre-doctoral research fellowship and also the NIHR doctoral research fellowship. First, I wanted to give you a bit of a background into me. So a lot of what has brought me to this point is the horrible term, the ominous term, the increasingly stigmatized phrase, which I'm pleased about, hard to reach. So my background is in HIV advocacy, and quite early on in HIV advocacy, I was told quite often that people who looked like me were hard to reach in health research. I heard it from academics, from medics, and people representing pharmaceutical companies. And actually, it's kind of the catalyst of a lot of what I've gone on to do for like the last 15 to 10 years. So some background into my area of study is whether you use the term seldom heard, difficult to access, structurally silenced, or easy to ignore, the academy and academics have been grappling with greater involvement of people in communities of health research to improve outcomes for different communities, especially those most disproportionately impacted by health conditions. And working with lived experience researchers is an approach to achieving this. So lived experience researchers are also known as peer researchers and co-researchers, but let's dig into what they are or what they can be specifically. Often they're community members who bring their lived experience to life and will have a research role within a study team. So for example, a woman who is postmenopausal being involved as a researcher on HIV and menopause study might be an approach. And this approach is established, but not exclusively used, but it is quite established in areas of health equity research. So for example, different aspects of mental health research, homelessness, HIV, with the idea of driving collaborative solutions. However, there's a limited data on how co-research is conceptualized, and there is different research that looks at some of the impacts of lived experience researchers in terms of disclosing one's health status, potentially additional emotional labour. And there was a small systematic review that spoke about the quality of studies when they involve peer or co-researchers. And ultimately, this is what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how co-researchers and lived experience researchers navigate academic health research within that kind of dual multi-dimensional role. Now, the reason why I'm telling you all of this is because my interests generally, I feel, complement quite well with some of the NIHR areas of strategic focus, and I guess the NIHR also agreed, hence why I was awarded the pre-doc fellowship and now the doctoral fellowship. But a lot of my areas of interest fitted and complemented quite well these different areas of the strategic focus. And I think it put me in a good stead when I was putting forward my ideas and when I was trying to demonstrate how my ideas did fit the improvement of people's health and research areas. So I would describe, I think officially this talk is called My Personal NIHR Fellowship Journey. I think the informal title is My Snakes and Ladders Journey Towards NIHR Fellowships. And I'm hoping that my topsy-turvy journey will offer comfort and also make you think that you can do it too. Because 10 years, 15 years after entering HIV advocacy, once upon a time, I said that I would never be an academic and I would never get involved in health research, which is utterly hilarious now. So if I can make that proclamation over a decade ago, hopefully you seeing my journey now will show you that we all have different options, even if they're not aware available to us or in our knowledge at the time. So a visual representation of snakes and ladders. Okay. So I won't go through all of this, but alongside being an active member of my students' union, I actually dipped out of, my background is in English literature with creative writing. So whilst I was doing HIV advocacy on the side, my career path wasn't really involved in health until I became a peer researcher. And whilst this pathway looks somewhat impressive, along the ways there were different knocks around my own health challenges, especially around mental health. And some of those personal experiences very much informed the application and kind of the direction around wanting to be more involved in co-production, wanting to tease out what lived experience researchers' experiences were like ultimately. So I was a peer researcher on an HIV and digital health project, and then I moved into a postdoc role. And following my postdoc role, I actually applied for an NIHR pre-doctoral fellowship. And the NIHR pre-doctoral fellowship allowed me many different opportunities, but specifically what I would say, it was a one-year pre-doctoral fellowship. And I was able to use that time for developing my doctoral research application and to also develop my ideas with more integrated and more focused attention on PPI activities and working with different third sector organisations to develop my idea for both my PhD application with my host Oxford University, and then also using the opportunity to start and begin my ideas for my NIHR doctoral research fellowship. So this has already been laid out already in terms of some of the different personal awards that are available. So I'll move past this point. But ultimately, when you hold a personal award, you're effectively like a PI, a principal investigator, who is the lead of that personal award with support with other people. So when it came to my pre-doctoral fellowship, I actually did it for 1 year. There's an option to do it for 1 or 2 years, but I had a master's that was already relevant. So I'd done a master's at Goldsmiths in applied anthropology and community development. So I was able to do a 1-year course where I did a lot of PPI activities. I engaged in short, very valuable courses and training, which helped me in my readiness for my PhD. So for example, my interest actually, my pre-doctoral fellowship was around the methodological strand, looking at mixed methods approaches. And whilst that 1 year opportunity, I did do mixed methods training as well as doing additional qualitative training. Actually, at the end of that process, I realized that my PhD idea, it worked better as a qualitative investigation because it was actually quite exploratory. So the pre-doctoral fellowship also enabled me to have a stronger PhD proposal because I was able to work through over that year some of my ideas for the PhD rather than launching straight into what I thought would be a mixed methods PhD. As I mentioned before, I then used the time to start on my NIHR doctoral research fellowship application and my PhD application because they are two separate applications. So, and I would say one of the tips that I would probably give to you if any of you are considering applying for this or you know somebody in the future that would, is the weakest part of my application actually is that I didn't explicitly state that I intended to apply for the doctoral research fellowship. So in my NIHR pre-doctoral research fellowship, I didn't explicitly say that I wanted to apply for the next one. And that was some of the feedback I got from the reviewers. So you can take that tip. And like I said, I had the opportunity to apply for a PhD place and develop some of my application during my pre-doctoral fellowship. And thankfully, it enabled me to develop the idea around investigating the experiences of peer and co-researchers in academic health research. And the title is Some Live It, Some Theorize It, and Some of Us Do Both, to kind of capture that energy. So in terms of now I've started my NIHR doctoral fellowship, and as part of when I applied for the doctoral fellowship, here are some of the resources that helped me. And I think, and I mention it now because they both helped me in terms of the doctoral research fellowship and the pre-doctoral fellowship. So when thinking about both applications, something that is really important and something that I learned is it's important to think about the project, what it is that you're striving to do. And as Ryan already said in the previous talk, thinking about also your training. So I was very focused on these are the aspirations that I have for this PhD project. I'm very interested in co-production, the involvement of people with lived experiences, but I wasn't always thinking about my own training pathways. And it is the personal award is also the training element is really important. So think about that in your application. The place, thinking about your host institution. And I want to stress again, I know it's already been mentioned about not using and not thinking of PPI as an afterthought. It's a really core component in the application. And this is my background, so I would say this anyway, but as well as it, the importance of it as part of your application form, it will also just strengthen the quality of your research as well. So always be thinking about PPI within and beyond applications. And then the person is you. So why you, why now, why this area? And when it comes to helpful resources, making the most of the people within your network who have applied for these awards. Make the most, yes, of the research support service. There are loads of guidance notes as well from different rounds of applications, which really helped me. The NIHR Academy, and there are loads of helpful nuggets and longer nuggets on the NIHR YouTube as well. And because I'm part of the pre-doctoral fellowship, there's also a network. So I made the most of that network too, which was really useful. And so I won't go into this, but this is my brief idea and a bit of an overview of what I'm hoping to achieve throughout my PhD. And I share this with you because I was able to develop these ideas through the course of the pre-doctoral fellowship. So hopefully it's giving you a sense of how my background in terms of both academic and non-academic then fed into the opportunity to apply for a pre-doctoral fellowship, which then gave me the opportunity to develop my ideas for a PhD application, and my NIHR doctoral research fellowship application. And it just really put me in good stead. Like I feel far more confident in the idea that I have for my PhD through that opportunity, and more confident in my ability to be a leading health researcher one day. So as I've now had the benefit of going through both processes, I thought I would compare to just give you a sense, and obviously any further questions you have, happy to dig into those. The NIHR pre-doctoral application is one stage, at least at the time of me talking about it, it's one stage, it may change in the future. Whereas the doctoral research fellowship is two stages, so application and then also an interview. The pre-doctoral fellowship took longer because the application was longer. So you can see, even just in terms of, I looked through the number of pages for each application form. I would say that the pre-doctoral fellowship, when I use the word restricted funding, it's that there are more pre-assigned areas for funding, so kind of like training, conferences, workshops, which is also the same with the doctoral research fellowship. And there's also an opportunity to also add extra bits of funding in terms of the amount that can be awarded, and also additional activities that might be awarded. When I applied for the pre-doctoral fellowship, there wasn't a mandatory PPI section, maybe different now, but there is in the doctoral fellowship. But there are also some similarities. So the real support from your host institution. And as the pre-doctoral fellowship was a younger program, I had a wealth of support. There were just fewer places to kind of ask for advice, but there was still a lot of advice. Whereas when it came to the doctoral fellowship, there were many more places to go, and many more people to talk to, because there just were more people who had received that award. So my final thoughts are plan, and plan, because it does take a long time, and I was very fortunate that I could use a lot of my time in the previous roles to apply for the pre-doc fellowship, and then in the pre-doc fellowship to apply for the doctoral fellowship. It does take a lot, because it's a significant amount of money, it's public funds, it shouldn't just be easily given. And within that spirit, excuse me, and within that spirit, it just make sure you have the time to put forward a considered application form, because it is worth it. So thank you very much for listening. Feel free to email me, and you can find me on, I didn't put it here, but you can find me on social media as well. So Twitter, LinkedIn, it's my name. So you'll be able to find me easily, hopefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we have a couple of questions. I think we should have time for at least two of them. So one of the questions were, when applying for NIHR funding, how much of your lived experience should you include? It feels like there is still resistance to including personal experience.
Oh, that's an excellent question. So I think the answer has to be personal. It's how comfortable you are sharing and talking about your own lived experience. And I think also it needs to be relevant, right? So I specifically spoke about the HIV advocacy element to my background when I was applying for both fellowships, because of the link to this idea of involvement of community, co-production, because within HIV advocacy, there's a very strong mantra about nothing about us without us. So I wanted to show that common thread and how my background over the last decade puts me in a good position to now investigate an area about lived experience researchers. So I think make it relevant, and also the answer will always be personal depending on how comfortable you feel to share about your own personal experiences. Though what I will say is that there's an excellent blog that I've now forgotten the name of, but around those 4 Ps, and person is very important. So your application form needs to be unique, even if you're not sharing all of the most vulnerable aspects of your life.
Great, thank you. We do have a few questions about PPI. So one of the questions, I'd be really keen to know what sort of PPI you used yourself for your doctoral work, but also how would you recommend including it? And if for projects, for example, for medical education projects, would that be students, lecturers, or would you say patients as well?
I can't speak to the specifics of medical education because that's not my background or my area of discipline. Generally, I would say think about the different organisations that might be interested in the area that you're working within, and then think about engaging third sector organisations. Make the most of the networks within your institution if it's available. We have a PPI network within our department. Reach out also to the NIHR research services, because I did actually apply for a mock interview for my doctoral research fellowship, and an aspect of it is that you could ask the people who have specific knowledge in particular areas. And I think also I think this is where the background work is really important. If you are reaching out to third sector organisations, I'll give you this tip as not as an academic, but as somebody who has been engaged by academics, making sure that you're clear on why you are engaging them. The topic is of relevance. It doesn't feel extractive. You are going to feed back if you are or aren't successful in the application, and you're thinking about the time commitments that they may need to give, thinking about the remuneration opportunities, just thinking about an equitable and a respectful way of working with PPI on an individual and organisational level will help with that.
Fantastic. So seeking help as well, and then seeing what is relevant, isn't it? Those are the key things. Maybe the last very quick one. How many older applicants have you seen? So pre-term of like pre-doctoral seems quite young. So people with older ages, wondering if it's still relevant for them as well.
So age-wise.
So age-wise.
So I can, speaking specifically to the NIHR pre-doctoral fellowship network that we are all able to be a part of, there was a broad range of ages. So I'm not going to guess their ages because I had never asked them specific ages, but there was a broad range of ages, from kind of undergrads, typical stereotypical age, to people who had a whole career and then were maybe pivoting. So hopefully that's encouraging.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for Bakita, and thank you very much for coming. And we have a little break now and moving to the main room for the next session.